Saudi Arabia and the Houthis exchange bodies in latest sign of talks progress between the two sides. Displaced families in Lash lack food and shelter amid absence of government and world aid agencies. Residents of Marib stand in long lines to buy fuel amid aggravating economic crisis. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shaza Abdelbaei. U.S. Ambassador to Yemen visited a National Museum of Asian Art in Washington, D.C. He checked the Ancient Yemen exhibition where he saw their art and trade. The exhibition also showcased the artistic and culture of Yemen's past. Yemen's Houthi movement and Riyadh have swapped 64 bodies of the killed soldiers in the latest sign of progress in negotiations to reach a peace settlement. This report has more details.
According to statements issued by the Houthi media on Wednesday, the latest sign of progress in negotiations to end Yemen's 8-year conflict was the exchange of 64 soldiers' bodies between Saudi Arabia and the Houthi Authority in control of northern Yemen. This was the third such recent agreement. Following weeks of discussions in Saudi Arabia, delegations from both sides gathered at the Saudi-Yemeni border to exchange bodies, according to footage and commentary from Houthi-run Al Masirah TV on Wednesday. The precise time of the exchanges was unclear. A military alliance led by Saudi Arabia intervened against the Houthi movement in 2015 after it overthrew Yemen's internationally recognized government from Sana'a in 2014. The war has decimated Yemen's economy, driven millions to famine, and claimed tens of thousands of lives. However, since Riyadh and Iran resumed diplomatic ties in March, efforts to end the conflict have picked up. The Houthi group received 58 bodies of its soldiers, while the Saudi delegation received 6. The handover of body bags between vans and trucks was captured on camera. The Saudi media did not provide coverage for the body swap, and Saudi authorities did not respond to a request for comment. Another indication of the mending of ties was Saudi Arabia's announcement last week that it would permit Yemen Airways to fly from Yemen's capital Sana'a to Saudi Arabia for the first time since the war broke out in 2015 to transport Muslims on their annual Hajj pilgrimage. On Saturday, the first plane carrying 273 pilgrims departed Sana'a for Jeddah. According to Houthi-run Sabat News, a number of Houthi officials, including Yahya al-Razami, the deputy chairman of the Houthi Military Committee, are in Saudi Arabia for the Hajj. Since May 2022, there has only been one weekly commercial flight from Sana'a to Amman, Jordan, under the leadership of the Saudi-led coalition. Prior to that, Sana'a was exclusively served by UN flights.
One soldier was killed and 7 others were injured when explosive devices targeted military vehicles in Ebian. Local sources said that 3 explosive devices targeted military vehicles and ambulances in Al Jaza area. The sources pointed out that the attack, which have not been reported by any party so far, caused the death of 1 soldier and the injury of 7 others who were taken to the city hospital for treatment. A woman in her 30s was injured when a mine explosion planted by the Houthi militia in Maqbana district of Taiz exploded. A human rights source said that the citizen has breaks in her leg and scattered shrapnel in her body as a result of Houthi mine explosion. The displaced families west of Lahj live in difficult living conditions as they suffer from lack of food and drinking water. On the other hand, some tents were not spared from the fires, which caused the displacement of some families. This report has more details.
The threat of the humanitarian crisis in Aitara camp haunts the displaced people and their homes. The conditions of the Yemeni crisis and the devastation it left behind has caused a great impact on the lives of the displaced after they left their homes. Amin Kulayb, a Yemeni citizen who lives with his wife and his 6 children, was forced to leave his village in Al Hudaydah Governorate years ago and live in a tent in Lahj Governorate.
I was displaced from Hudaydah Governorate to Qataba. Then the war ravaged everything there, so I had to come here to Lahj Governorate. We've been on Aitara camp for 6 months now, and we are suffering a lot from hunger, starvation, and the poor quality of the tents.
The suffering inside this camp was not limited to women and men, but also included the child Asil, who was subjected to some injuries as a result of the fire that destroyed his family's tent a few days ago, and his mother was unable to find medicine.
We were displaced from a camp in Hudaydah Governorate. I came here with my children to have a proper living, but we keep facing one tragedy after another, between fires, heavy rain, starvation, or thieves, who come in and steal all our belongings. No one is helping us during this hard time. We're living amid very difficult and devastating circumstances.
More than 300 families were displaced from their homes years ago to Qataba before they come here. Shortage of food and unsafe water for drinking, tents exposed to fire and rains, and families living in the open. This is the condition of the camp in which citizens have pursued refugee. The displaced people expressed the misery that they live in, but their choice of displacement came as a result of the war that the Houthi militia imposed on them and destroyed their homes. Aitara camp is not the only one whose displaced people suffer from the misery of living. Tens of kilometers away, displaced families suffer from homelessness and hunger in Lahj camps.
2 months ago, we were exposed to a huge fire that burned all the containers. Then 2 days ago, another fire broke out here in the camp, and as you can see, everything was destroyed. We asked for other tents to protect our families and children, and they got us new ones. However, a group of people came, burned our tents, and stole everything we have, including the water containers.
The current humanitarian crisis inside this camp is the largest since their displacement, while starvation, famine, and violations practiced in the tents threaten the lives of many women and children.
بن ثياب نشطط يعني ثياب نروح عن القرى نحوس وهذا نروح بثياب ونصلحها مآوي لنا وكراتين من الشوارع. والله ان احنا نكره المطر، يخسع لنا البطانيات، يخسع الفراش، يخسع الجماش، نسمر براده، خاسعين احنا وجهالنا.
فالمأوى الانتقالي هذا الكنتيرة جعلتهم يعيشوا في استقرار للمستفيدين من ناحية سواء من ناحية الأمطار أو لا من ناحية العواصف والرياح والرملية، بما أنه عندنا هنا في مأرب الرياح بتكون شديدة.
Rashad Al-Alimi stressed the need for the international community to end human suffering and the grave violations by the Houthi militia. He received the ambassador of the United States of America today to deal with the efforts to end the war. The president praised the bilateral relations with the United States of America and Washington's positions in the support of the PLC. The Chamber of Commerce in Sana'a attacked the Ministry of Industry for storming its headquarters and hiring a new illegal administration. The Chamber of Commerce and Industry confirmed that the management of the chamber, appointed by the Houthi militia, is illegal and pledged to take all measures to restore it. The statement disapproved Houthi rumors that the chamber's elected board of directors had approved. The gasoline crisis is increasing by another day in Ma'rib, where hundreds of buses line up to obtain 40 liters of fuel in front of petrol stations with long distances of about 2 kilometers, which causes suffering among citizens. This report has more details.
Since the oil business is the principal provider of petrol in the nation, hundreds of cars have been lined up in front of gas stations for hours or even days. Those in authority claim that demand for oil is rising significantly, particularly with the approaching of Eid al-Adha. People's lives are now contingent on avoiding the 2-kilometer-long lines that have formed due to the oil crisis effects.
We wonder why the oil company is increasingly harassing bus drivers. We do not oppose any measures to restrain the spread of the black market. Most of the citizens depend on the work revenue from the buses.
Anas al-Rassas is one of the bus owners whose family rely heavily on the daily revenue from buses. He makes an effort to repair his bus and finish the lining up voyage in order to obtain 40 liters of gasoline. He said that he left his family without a source of income for around 3 days.
We line up at the gas station from morning until sunset, sometimes for 2 days, to get 40 liters, which are enough for 5 days. The official authorities must find a solution to this crisis in the absence of salaries.
While some stations are entirely devoid of petrol, the prolonged scenes in front of gas stations demonstrate people's uneasiness. This decreases its availability at some stations during this crisis, but it's still widely available on the black market with excessive rates, which makes individuals wonder about the accessibility of it, which became limited due to the problems brought on by the black market and its disappearance from the city's gas station.
Coming next in the news. Pottery industry in Taz witnessed decline due to years of conflict. Welcome back. Houthi militia has established additional prisons and detention centers in Hodeidah. Human rights sources reported that the Houthi militia established additional prisons located behind the criminal investigation building in the city of Hodeidah. Sources confirmed that this step came after the prisons of the so-called security and intelligence service of the militia were filled with large numbers of prisoners and abductees. The Yemen mobile phone company continued to make digs in an archaeological site in Damar. This came to install reinforcement towers for the company based on an explicit directive from the director of the presidency office in the hijacked capital Sana'a. Local sources confirmed that the Yemen mobile company is continuing digs at Daf archaeological site. The International Committee of the Red Cross welcomed reports of the exchange of human dead bodies between the parties to the conflict in Yemen. 64 bodies were agreed to be swapped between the conflict parties in a new sign of progress to reach a peace settlement in the country. The pottery industry in Taiz is witnessing a significant decline due to the low demand for its purchase by citizens. This report has more details.
The young man, Asil Mahmoud, mastered the use of clay in his hands to make different forms of pottery, trying to preserve the craft of pottery making, which faces an existential threat in Taiz and led to a decline in demand and meager financial returns.
As for the work amid these days, it's stagnant and the demand is declined. We sell maximum 1 or 2 pots per day, and sometimes we spend 3 and 4 days without selling anything because of the economic war that are going through.
In only a few shops of the famous El Shanini market, you find pottery hanging on the walls and entrances of the shops, such as jars, incense burners, and small pots, and either arranged on top of each other like orbs and barrels, or left on the sidewalk. These became heritage tools that are less in demand day after day, after they were the only means to prepare food and save water until recently, and hardly a house is devoid of it in Yemen.
I am the owner of this shop and I receive pots, incenses and barrels. In the beginning, we used to receive a lot of demands, but now the situation is deteriorating, despite the fact that Al Shanini market is the best and people come from far areas. Al Shanini market is the convergence point of Taiz, Ib and other areas. People flock to this area as it's the only place which sells pots.
Pottery making is not just a profession for livelihood or a habit that Yemenis have been accustomed to for a long time, but rather a value free from the damages that other utensils bring, such as plastics and others.
Here's a reminder of the main headlines. Saudi Arabia and the Houthis exchange bodies in latest sign of talks progress between the two sides. Displaced families in Lahj lack food and shelter amid absence of government and world aid agencies. Residents of Marib stand in long lines to buy fuel amid aggravating economic crisis. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.